Chapter 7 starts us off with the Resistance not being able to contact Reddits for some reason. Apparently though, it's because there's a jammer in the Onovan Desert that's preventing us from contacting him. And while games usually play up the whole, this place is dangerous, you can't go there, dude. Well, here it's not a joke. So before we set off, we do some setting up as usual, and we check back in the deployment center to see that we got an infinite resist force metal, which makes you immune to all stat lowering effects. Keep this in mind as it is a special tool we'll use for later. The Scope Buster Mark II is available, which is just a stronger version of the Scope Buster, obviously. Force Metal Shop has also started selling fire resist force metals, which act as 2 fire guard force metals into 1, reducing your damage from fire attacks by 50% instead of 25%, which is really nice to have. Unfortunately, unlike the rest of the game, this isn't foreshadowing towards anything in particular. Still, they're going to be useful at some point, so we buy 3 of them anyway. Back at the secret shop, we restock on all our essentials, but still don't have enough for our Turbo Buster. We also buy a singular neutralizer -30 because it's a special tool we'll also use for later. Now that shopping's done, we head back to the command room and face the nightmare hellscape that is the Onovan Desert, or the Venalia Desert as the game actually calls it outside of this one scene. Upon reaching the desert, you can already tell that this map is going to be hell as your visibility becomes terribly impaired by the ensuing storm. I remember on my first playthrough, I didn't really bother reading any of the text and just wandered this area for well over an hour before actually figuring out what I was supposed to actually do. Basically, these pillar-like things are jammers. Towards the bottom, you'll spot some cables. What you're supposed to do, and what the game does tell you to do if you bother reading, is follow these cables all the way down to this facility where the jamming signal is coming from, and then from there follow more cables in the hopes that you find a way to unlock the locked door that's leading into the facility itself. So that's what we do. Along the way, we run into a lot of interesting enemies, but the most interesting by far is this Meltdown. He has 26,000 life energy and inflates his balloon hand every turn for 3 turns, where he will unleash his atomic fall, dealing a flat 9,999 damage to the entire party with absolutely 0 ways to reduce the damage. You can survive it technically by having an X-Heart or decoy equipped, but I didn't, so I died. I find myself running away from so many encounters in this area simply because it takes way too many resources just to get through them. Just like with Goltio's laboratory, the difficulty once again spikes hard as enemies want you deader than a TV series with too many seasons. Like, look at this. I'm fighting 2 enemies, only 2, and they're sending my ass to next Tuesday. Eventually though, we make it past the jammers and find ourselves in the lovely company of the illustrious Ferrum, the embodiment of BDSM herself. She turns on the quicksand button, and X starts getting slowly vored by the ground below him. Not wanting to indulge in this, Massimo grabs onto X, only to be pulled in as well. Zero sees this and for some reason thinks it's a good idea to also grab onto Massimo, but funnily enough, he stands his ground. But while Zero holds steady, Ferrum begins giving back shots to Zero until he can't take it anymore and gives himself to the beast below. Fortunately for our heroes, X has a hidden hyper mode called Plot Armor, which keeps us and the gang alive as we instead find ourselves inside the facility we were just looking to get into already. How convenient. Anyways, inside the facility proper, we're forced to trek through a maze, activating color-coded switches to unlock doors locked behind color-coded lasers. While this does take some time to do, you actually aren't required to pull any of the switches. But there are some extra goodies behind these doors, like these build items, so we unlock them anyway. There is a build hyper in front of this yellow switch, so be sure to grab it and use it to bring your total number of hyper mode activations to 8. The encounters in this area are mostly the same as the enemies you encountered outside, so nothing really to talk about here. Just collect the treasures, save, then ride the elevator up to either the first or second floor to progress the plot, although the first floor is where you actually want to go. Whichever floor you go to, we're greeted with the scene with Botos, the ugly bastard, watching us on his computer monitor with intense intensity. Angry at the fact that Ferrum didn't even finish us off, he's then interrupted by Scarface, who offers us as Botos' sloppy seconds, to which Botos gladly accepts, like the beta cuck he is. Botos' longing to be Epsilon's favorite pet aside, we find ourselves in the second half of the dungeon. Wow, that's faster than usual, huh? I sure hope there's nothing in this dungeon that'll make this part of the script longer than it should be. So the second half of the dungeon requires you to go into 4 big rooms that possess green lasers that you have to move using these here reflectors. The goal is to make sure the green laser hits this box right here, which will unlock the door to the rooms directly above it so that you can disable the jammer inside. You're only restricted to this first room at first, but after the first jammer is gone, the other 3 rooms on the first floor unlock. As for the encounters in this area, this is where you'll fight a lot of Prions, most notably Prion S. Ferums and Prion S. Botos. These new Prions have hands, so you'll want to take them out quickly and effectively before they take you out first. The laser rooms also have unique encounters separated from the rest of the dungeon, such as these tri-claw killers that really want to dig their claws into you. We do head back to HQ to check on our deployments and to rest up to regain our resources. This does put us in the very unfavorable position of having to trek through all the desert once more, but luckily the facility isn't that hard to find since you can literally see the lights on the roof shining. I don't know if this is because of the emulator or if it's always been a thing, but I'm thankful for it either way. Anyways, we finished the laser puzzles for the remaining rooms and unlocked the way to the 3rd floor. Along the way, I did get a build power drop from one of the Prion soldiers, which is probably why I thought good luck was putting in work, since I did have it equipped at the time. I sucked it off for a bit of extra protein and continued on my merry way. There is another thing about the laser rooms that should be brought up. So, if you'll notice, there are some locked item boxes on the 2nd floor rooms. To unlock these, you have to make sure to hit all of these boxes? I don't know what to call them. They look like telephone boxes, so that's what I'll call them. You have to make sure that the laser hits all of the telephone boxes in the room, which will unlock the trapped goodies inside the shields. Doing so is well worth it since you can get things like a free fire resist, a combat and shot absorber, and a build life energy and weapon energy, among other things. Once that's done with, we head back down to save on the basement floor, then head on up to face Botos, who's... well...
Welcome to your own doom. Boy, oh boy, you really must have fate on your side to have survived the quicksand.
Yeah, he's a bit of a joke character if those footsteps aren't indication enough. Or is he? Anyways.
I am Botos.
He is Botos, and he's the first cadre we're going to have to fight. But first, he wants to finish us off like he said before, so he whips out his dick, which is this small, and takes some Viagra to ensure that he is firm enough for X's tight little X-Buster, and then...
Time for a little lesson in agony.
So the fight begins, and we're immediately greeted with an all too familiar mechanic at this point of the game. Summoning a couple of minions to make the fight harder than it should be. Except this time, they not only make the fight harder, they have the potential to make this fight drag out forever. So, let's go over these assholes. Botos has a whopping 40,000 life energy, takes 50% less damage from fire, normal damage from thunder, and 50% extra damage from water. He doesn't really have anything interesting to steal, so we're free to build for damage. Meanwhile, the qubits he summons each come with 2,000 life energy, takes 25% less damage from fire damage, normal from thunder, and 50% more from water. You'll basically want to bring a fire hydrant to this fight for all the water weakness. This fight seems simple enough, right? Well, my dear viewer, we haven't even gotten to their movesets. Remember when I talked about the Great Wall of China for this playthrough? Well, this still isn't it, but it's damn near close. And I know you're getting tired of hearing this, but this is the hardest boss in the run so far. Yes, even Shadow wasn't as hard as this asshole. Botos has 8 abilities. Botos Trio is the one that summons the qubits. 2-bit is his standard attack that hits twice and deals combat damage. Battle Rhapsody deals shot type damage to the entire party, Showtime does the same but bigger, and he also has 4 battle songs that affect the battle in various ways. Battle Forte acts like boost power for the entire party, Battle Allegro does the same but for speed, meanwhile Battle Andante instead lowers your party speed by 25%, capping it at 50%. And Cradle Song does the same as Battle Andante except for both armor and shield. Botos is essentially a bard with the ability to ramp up his teammates while debuffing your party until you can't out-heal his damage anymore. I could theoretically burst him down enough before that happens, but then we run into another problem, the qubits. See, qubits come with 3 abilities. 2 of them are damage moves we've seen before, Mega Fire and Death Gravity. But this third ability, this one ability, is the absolute bane of this fight. Can you guess what it is? That's right, if you guessed it heals the boss, then you'll be spared in the coming Rapture when the AI overlords finally take over. Yes, each qubit has the ability to use life gain 25 on either themselves or on Botos at random times. And if they target Botos with it, that's 10,000 damage you worked so hard to inflict just gone. And even if you kill either of them, Botos can just summon them again indefinitely. The best way I can describe this fight is that it's essentially a combination of every major boss mechanic we've encountered so far. We have Dr. Psyche's bullshit minion summoning, Mach Gentra's possible healing mechanic via the Prion soldiers he can summon, Shadow's bullshit gravity mechanic, and Wild Django's stat boosting and lowering mechanic. The only thing missing is the Hippopressor's missile mechanic and maybe something from Incentus. All that being said, there's just too much going on for me to really focus on one thing at a time. On one hand, you can spend time buffing yourself in every stat, but that's a lot of turns going by where you're not only having to constantly heal, but also pray to whatever deity exists in this game that you either don't get your stat debuffed, or he doesn't decide to buff his own stats. And remember when I complained how Ultra items fell off really quickly? Yeah, that's still true, because despite their water weakness, Ultra Blizzard only deals 1500 damage to the qubits out of their 2000. And from my understanding, they're more likely to heal when they're injured. This isn't always true, as they will sometimes try to heal even when they're at full health, which my guess would be it's a response to when Botos drops to a certain point. So there's also that to worry about too. And of course, if you go for charged shots, Botos is very likely to get 2 turns, one to resummon the bits, and the other to make your life miserable. After a few attempts, I was forced to make an executive decision. I had to find some other way to deal with Botos. So I went back to base, checked on my deployments to discover that my dudes have returned with the Tiana key, just the thing I had been hoping for. With this, I can advance to new heights. Potentially. We also got a generator sub-weapon, which instantly generates 20% weapon energy in a pinch. And damn does this thing put in work for this run. From there, I had to decide what I wanted to do with myself. I could grind levels, but I was still adverse to it. The Icebuster Mark II is also a viable option for big damage as well. At the end of the day though, I decided to take a quick detour. If all went well, I could get a very powerful upgrade that could make Botos an absolute cakewalk. But first, I had to go to Tiana Camp and proceed through the locked door that we encountered earlier. Once inside, we have 2 paths, left or right. The left path contains a radar killer we can send to the deployment center along with some tank parts, but the right side will find her. Meet Rafflesian. She is a VTuber that is upset that we walked in on her during her routine VTubing without knocking first. That's not entirely a joke. Well, aside from the VTuber thing, she's technically a super idol. Anyways, she literally gets so pissed off that we caught a glimpse of her secret lesson or whatever and wants us fucking dead, and so the combat begins. Calliope is accompanied by Fuwawa and Makoko, the 2 belladonnas on either side of her. They also want you dead, like a certain VTuber agency that owes $500,000 to charity, among other things. You might also notice that some weird shit is happening in this fight that I wish I could explain, but these bitches have hands and are beating my ass. Oh my god, I'm dead! I didn't even get a turn! So, the way this fight works is actually very simple. How you handle it is not. Basically, Calliope and Fuamoko have a gimmick where they raise their stats under certain conditions. Callie raises her stats every time her turn comes up to a maximum of 7 turns. Meanwhile, Fuamoko only gains stats if they have taken at least 1 instance of damage on a turn once per turn. So the strat for this fight is pretty simple. Focus down Callie while she's still weak, then kill Fuwawa and Makoko one at a time. That's simple, right? You couldn't be more wrong. Because all 3 of them have passive regeneration that makes this fight incredibly hard for a solo run. See, every turn, they restore 25% of their current hit points. For the record, Callie has 31,500 life energy, and Fuamoko both have 20,500 life energy each. Essentially, in order to ensure you're able to kill any of these girls, you absolutely need to hit them with enough damage so that they don't immediately heal it all off, and you need to be consistent with it. This means that X-Fire is kind of off the table when it comes to big damage, since your action trigger basically guarantees that Callie goes twice in a row, which just gets her back to full health. And if you don't kill her quickly enough, she just gets to have 2 turns naturally anyway, or even up to 3 or 4 turns. This fight is a race against time, and you're a snail catching up to a cheetah on speed. Even their movesets are cancer. Calliope can perform a standard strike that hits a single target for combat damage, Deep Impact for heavy combat damage that ignores armor and shield, Riot to cause the party to go berserk, Terra Thunder, which deals heavy thunder damage to a single target, Ultra Giga Blizzard that deals water-based damage to the entire party, and every third turn she gets, she uses her signature move, Sunburst, which deals 10 hits to each party member, dealing a flat 250 points of damage per hit for a total of 2,500 damage. While you can reduce this damage if you're defending at the time, only taking 125 damage per hit, you're still taking a lot of damage. And like X-Fire and defending also reduces the damage further to like 62 per hit. And if you have Shot Absorber, that reduces the damage to about 187 per hit. No matter how you look at it, there's just no way I can handle this fight right now. But I wanted to give it an honest try because defeating these girls nets you the ultimate armor hyper mode for X, which is so strong that it makes the entire base game piss easy. Unfortunately, it was not meant to be, so we backed out and returned to base once more. I decided to return to the desert and take another swing at Botos, this time with the Ice Buster Mark II, since that would definitely deal a ton more damage than anything I've been using so far. Maybe I can burst him down before the healing becomes a problem and before my stats get too low. With a fire resist and a normal ass resist force medal to lower fire damage and my chances of having my stats drop, I managed to survive just a little bit longer this time. With 2 boost powers, I was even doing upwards of 6,800 damage to the man. Sadly, this still wasn't enough as I was just not getting enough turns, especially once Botos starts boosting his speed. I've tried numerous setups, but after numerous attempts, I couldn't even come close to winning. Botos was just too strong for me. But then I had an epiphany. While taking some time to look at what I can obtain from deployments or even the Eternal Forest, I got an idea. See, if you take the left path 6 times and then the right path once, you'll be rewarded with a build speed, a build power, but most importantly, a turbo clock sub-weapon. This is one of the most powerful sub-weapons in the game if you know how to use it in normal runs. Essentially, it temporarily increases your speed for that turn, making your next turn come a little bit sooner. You can even stack 2 of them if you really wanted to. My thought process for this was, because Botos and his qubits take multiple turns already, my hope was that Turbo Clock would allow me to at least go after each of them takes their turns only once. This was unlikely since bosses like to be faster than X, but it was worth a shot. So I went through the Eternal Forest, fought through some of the now weaker enemies, struggled against the stronger enemies like these Prion-S Botos and Ferums, got absolutely wrecked by new enemies we hadn't encountered yet like these red hubcaps, and claimed our prize inside. I only used one of my 4 gain hypers, but I think it was still worth it in this case. Afterwards, I was feeling a little saucy and made my way to the Gimiala mines to grind out a second Turbo Clock, which has a 2% drop from any of the Metar counter enemies you can run into, but also to grind some money from these groups of gold and silver Metars you can encounter in these locked areas of the mines. Silver Metars drop 2,500 Zenny on death, but it gets halved if they're hit by a combat type attack and survive. Gold Metars function the same way, except they drop 7,000 Zenny upon defeat. The best way to defeat them is by using X-Fire and using your action trigger. I then returned to the secret shop, but noticed I was still shy some money, so I started selling extra weapon items that weren't being used to reach the 100,000 that I needed for the Turbo Buster. To reiterate, this is one of the strongest busters in the game with 90 power, 10 armor and shield, and 0 weight. On top of that, as long as my weapon energy is on the higher side, the Turbo Buster deals extra damage. I don't know the exact calculations for this, but it's well worth it if you're able to maintain high weapon energy, which we most certainly can. The only other weapons that have more power are the Limit Buster Mark II and the X Buster Mark III, both of which are only obtainable during the endgame. The only reason I had the Limit Buster Mark II so early right now is because they dropped from the red hubcaps that I fought in the Eternal Forest. but wasn't worth mentioning since I've never been a fan of weapons that rarely deal the finishing blow, unless I was farming final strikes or something, which isn't possible here, and having Botos potentially live for more turns than he should was not exactly on my bingo card. Speaking of Botos, now that we are as prepared as we're going to be, we made our way back through the desert to face the ugly bastard once more, this time with more power and more determination. My current setup consists of the Turbo Buster, Turbo Clock, and Generator. As for my Force Medals, I equip 2 gain weapon energy plus 5s, giving me a total of plus 35 weapon energy generation per turn. And that infinite resist force medal I mentioned a while back to make me completely immune to any stat lowering effects. However, this does put me in the danger zone, so to fix that, I equipped that neutralizer minus 30 I also mentioned a while back to get my immunity down to 32 out of 33. This fight was still rough, and I didn't beat it my first try here either. His minions are still very fast, so it's beneficial to start the fight with 2 boost speeds as soon as possible. After boosting your speed, you'll want to prioritize survival. He's more likely to use his standard attack than his showtime attack, so it's usually better to boost your armor before boosting shield. As for the Cubits, we're basically just face tanking their Mega Fires at this point since they only deal about 300 damage right now, while praying we don't get hit or screwed over by death gravity too much. After we're fully set up, Turbo Clock and Generator will help us maintain pace with Botos and his minions since Turbo Clock pretty much eliminates the speed loss I take when using my action trigger, meaning I'm still able to get my turn even if Botos resummons the Cubits. This was exactly what I was hoping would happen and why I went out of my way to obtain Turbo Clock in the first place. And with the extra weapon energy generated from Generator, I can maintain a high amount of energy from my Turbo Buster to keep its damage high and his Cubits down. Eventually, I found myself in a loop of hitting action trigger, killing one of the Cubits, taking attacks, killing another Cubit, taking more attacks, action trigger, all in that order. This wasn't a guaranteed win, however, because the Cubits do still get a turn outside of my action trigger, meaning there's always a chance one of them can just reset a huge amount of progress by healing Botos for a solid chunk of hit points. There are also times where I would have to forsake attacking for healing because my hit points dip too low. But at this point, I pretty much had the fight down and even had the confidence that even if the Cubits healed him, I could outdamage that healing faster than they could try doing it again. This was actually proven true right here, as I continued trekking on, whittling Botos down bit by bit until eventually one final charge shot and 106 turns later, Botos reaches his climax and I receive a 20% XP boost for my troubles, bringing me to level 27. Now, before we continue with this cutscene where Botos submits himself to our pure unadulterated Giga Chad prowess, I want to answer a question I bet a lot of you might have at this point. Why didn't I use Hyper Mode and just sat in it for 8 turns and used Gain Hypers to maintain it? After all, this seemed like one of those times where it would actually be entirely beneficial to do so, right? And you'd be correct. Going into X-Fire mode would have allowed me to take half damage from all of Botos' attacks and the Cubit's Mega Fire easily without needing to boost my defenses at all. X-Fire also would have made me immune to death gravity and stat lowering effects by default. This would mean that the only thing I would need to really worry about are the actual damaging attacks from Botos and the Cubits. Then the only thing I had to do was outdamage any kind of healing thrown Botos' way, which can easily be done with Charge Collider with its beefy 7k damage at 100% energy. Even if I needed to cool down and wait for another charge, I could just use Unlock Limiter to buy myself 3 free extra turns of extra stats and potentially deal lethal damage to Botos the next time I use Hyper Mode once the stat boosts wore off. So why in God's green earth didn't I even entertain this idea in the first place? Well, the answer is quite simple. I overthought this fight way too hard. Under normal circumstances, Botos is one of those bosses that can catch players off guard if you're not prepared for it. So in the back of my mind, I knew that this would be a tough fight for me to deal with even before starting this run. This mentality caused me to overlook one small detail that would internally cement the idea that this fight would be a wall in this run. See, Botos' model is hovering above the ground, which made me assume that he'd be an air-type boss. Him being air-type would mean that my normal attacks in X-Fire would be useless against him because of the lower accuracy. Even Charge Collider would deal significantly less damage, since its damage is based on the number of hits that land, which would be much less on airborne targets, naturally. But... no. Botos is a ground-type enemy. Only his qubits are air-type. There wasn't really anything stopping me from using X-Fire at all, except my own misinterpretation of the fight. And the worst part? I even analyzed Botos on the first attempt and somehow didn't register that he was a ground-type unit. I potentially inadvertently made the fight much harder than it needed to be. I do say potentially because in theory, a lot could have gone wrong. I could have blown through way more gain hypers than I would have wanted, for instance, or there'd be too many heals for me to keep up with. However, now the fight's done, I'll never be able to entertain the possibility that the fight could have been easier. Boy, I'm sure glad I realized this only after writing this part of the script and not while I was playing. Anyways, now that I'm done monologuing, Botos proceeds to... Oh. He ran away while I was talking. Well, that's unfortunate. Luckily, he conveniently dropped his Super Force medal for us to take back home, while Massimo comments about how it was all too... Massimo, you weren't even here for this fight. Once the jammers are disabled, we let headquarters know that we've not only succeeded in taking out the jammers, but also obtained some Super Force metal for analysis and return home, thus ending Chapter 7.